our world when I get to step into that space you created through music. I am grateful. Tomorrow, our nation honors the extraordinary moral witness to our people, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wrote perhaps his most well-known speech, "I have a dream." But I'm kind of fond of the beginning of that speech, which isn't quoted nearly as often. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Many decades earlier, a Midwestern woman, Myrtle Fillmore, would write, "I want everyone to know about this beautiful true law and to use it. It's not a new discovery, but when you use it and get the fruits of health and harmony, it will seem new to you, and you will feel that it is your own discovery." And with this, she began the account of her own healing. And not just her own well-being was restored, but a movement toward truth began. It led to the formation of our Unity Global family to this very day, this very hour, this very room. It was not only the discovery of Myrtle, or is not only the discovery, as Myrtle would say, but it was an expression of living and demonstrating a truth that Jesus said would set us free. Our movement in unity grew through huge waves of human interest until in 1921, when Myrtle's husband, Charles Fillmore, would write the Statement of Faith, a document of principles by which unity could be practiced and made real in daily life. There once was a man who declared, unity is not really a church. It's a way of life. Well said, my friend. So the statement of faith that we began looking at last week and we will conclude today is more like a laboratory for discovery than a courtroom for judgment and consequences. Last week, we explored the statements that Charles wrote to help bring unity, or a movement called New Thought, or even metaphysical Christianity, to bring it into harmony with the tradition of Christianity that has developed over the past 2,000 years. Charles Fillmore wrote an article more than a century ago that he entitled, "All the Way." All the way. He said that unity attempts to take the principles Jesus spoke of all the way. Myrtle would say, use the inherent logic of your mind to take the principles we speak of to their conclusion, to fulfill their purpose. This is a very powerful idea. It reminds me of the phrase often heard in contemporary communities, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do in this situation, in this circumstance, within this group, this community? That theme actually came from a book by Charles Sheldon entitled In His Steps, which is still one of the record holders of publishing history, with more than 50 million copies sold to date. After the Bible, it is considered the most sold book of all time, at least since printing began. So whether the principles come from our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, they come from the inspired words of Dr. King, or closer to our home, leading thoughts of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. The point is, what will we do with such ideas? How will we practice the truths or the realizations that come to us? Dr. King declared a focus for us to work with. I quote, "I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." Let that soak in for a moment. Unity makes these declarations or statements of faith not for you to simply accept. Yes, Reverend Stacey, whatever you say, in order to be that good unity student. No, these statements are for you to look at, shake, turn upside down, pull apart, make them your own. As Myrtle said, make it your own discovery. I wanted to emphasize this, and I will again and again, of course, emphasize that these statements, which sometimes can feel not just to you, but throughout our unity history, the editors at World Headquarters, some of these were like, "Charles, did you really have to write that? Did you really have to put it that way?" But in the spirit that we celebrate tomorrow in Dr. King, take these unity statements of faith in the manner in which they're offered, for you to remold and make your own. They speak of promise, they speak of ideas, they speak of going back to the very beginning of our unity movement, when Charles and Myrtle offered ideas that worked for them. Myrtle was condemned to death in 1886. She worked with these ideas that she was a child of God and not created to be a sick machine. She was created to live. And so she devoted herself. Remember that great gift of your attention? She put her great gift upon these ideas, and it restored her body. And then she realized, well, it's not just about this beautiful body. It's also about all the qualities of mind. Charles, inspired by Myrtle, would later come up with his conception of the 12 powers we have floating above us in the sanctuary week to week. Ideals. Myrtle said there are ideals within my mind and heart, within my soul, that are God's gift to me, but it is for me to what? Make something of them. She said, God involves these possibilities within us so that we can evolve these possibilities into how we live, relate, work together, love one another. So she knew there was more to do. And then finally, you would have thought she lived in the 1960s, because finally she said, well, gosh, this is not all about me. This is not all about me. I've made this discovery. How can I lovingly support others in awakening to the magnificent possibilities within them? So now we get to these statements of faith. And we're going to look at some of the outliers, as it were. Whereas last week we looked at statements such as, in unity we believe in all the doctrines of Christianity, spiritually interpreted. Charles threw nothing out of the traditions of Christianity, but he reserved the right, as I remind you, to make those ideals. Make those ideas of Jesus Christ your own by living them, developing them in your unique way. This week, we look, as I said, at the outliers or some of the more controversial, but I like to say in a more positive way, these statements today were unity's gift to traditional Christianity. This was like, wow, this is an idea that lives in us as unity students, and we share it with the world. Now, the Fillmores were always careful to say we didn't invent these ideas. We just behold them and then work them into our individual life. And then we offer that as a gift to the world. Charles Fillmore said in the early days of unity, when he would talk, and as the story goes, there was a big Franklin stove in the corner, and he'd just keep talking his lesson as he would go over and put more logs on the fire. I'm glad I don't have to pause during my lessons to go stoke the furnace downstairs. It's automatic these days. But Charles would do whatever was necessary and keep talking about the idea that he was focused on. And he would tell the people in the room in those days, take these ideas of unity, take them home, make them your own, work them into your life. And if they don't produce good, they don't produce fruit, he said, cast them aside and go your way and don't have any sense of guilt about it. Go take up something that is awakening the life within you. Years later, as Unity World headquarters grew in Kansas City, sometimes a speaker would come to town, a New Thought speaker. And the Unity folks, ooh, this guy, this woman's really good. I think I'm going to leave Unity and go follow them. And people would come concerned to Charles' office, and he'd say, well, let them go. Let them follow what is right for them. There are plenty of people that want to work with us, with these unity ideas. Unity is not a cult. You're free to come and go. So our first statement, there we go. Number 6, if you're going by the numbers. By the way, when you leave today, if you did not get the pretty printed out document of the statement of faith last week, there are more copies that the ushers will give you as you leave. So here's a special gift. Charles wrote, "We believe in the 12 disciples, the 12 powers of man, going forth into mind and body with authority to teach, preach, heal, and wholly save man and the world from sin, sickness, and death." What do you really believe, Charles? He'd put some energy behind this, but this was a metaphysical look at the disciples, the close students who followed Jesus, and to see them as symbols of powers within us. Not looking at the 12 disciples as historical figures 2,000 years ago, way off in the Mediterranean world, but to look, what idea do they represent that's a gift within you? Of course, they're here in this room. The disciple Bartholomew, Charles associated with imagination, the blue window back here. What is imagination? To sit around and daydream or make things up? No, it's a spiritual gift that if you have an inner insight of how truth or love, creativity, goodness, beauty, how it might express through your life, your faculty of imagination allows you to create in mind images of what that might look like. Francine might say, I want to make a difference in my community. Her imagination can be activated to show her possibilities of how she might make a difference. What would that look like in her community? What problem could she help solve in her community? This is the imagining or picture quality of your soul that allows you to shape good into actual examples that you can live and work. So we saw the disciples as living teachers, pointing the way to us of how we can use these spiritual gifts. Point 10, which is closely related. We believe in the creative power of thoughts and words, that they do accomplish what whereunto they are sent, and that all men are held accountable even for their lightest words. Holly sang to us, of every prayer is heard. Everything that you shape into a word, well, first a thought, express in a word that leads to an action, makes a difference. Unity is always emphasized. You're always creating. Don't tell me you're not creative. You're always creating. Be conscious. Choose the good you want to create. This one stirred things up in 1921. We believe that the Holy Mother, the divine feminine, is now being restored to her righteousness, to her right place, and that she will reign equal with Jehovah God in the heavens and on the earth. Many times in this congregation and others that I've served, people have come up and said, "Oh, Reverend Stacey, why are we always beginning prayers, Father, Mother, God? Are we trying to be politically correct?" No. It was the Fillmore's idea that God, as infinite being, has qualities that humanity has considered masculine, as directive, judgmental, discerning, and properties humanity has called feminine, in nurturing, loving, caring. And that God must surely have both these qualities, and more we have yet to understand. And so they wanted to create through words this idea of a divine source or universal parent, as it were, that is all things to you. This, however, in its time was disturbing, and Unity endeavored ways to rewrite it, making it a little softer and a little more palatable. I was going to say to the men of Unity, but that's not really true. There were many women that objected to the concept of God as mother. 22. We believe that the separation of spirit, soul, and body caused by physical death is restored by rebirth of the same spirit in another body here on earth. We believe the repeated incarnations of man to be a merciful provision of our loving Father, and for the final restoration of the whole human race through regeneration to a deathless estate here on earth. Yes, the Fillmores taught the concept commonly known as reincarnation, re-embodiment, repeated lives on earth as the only kind provision of a generous God, that we have more than one lifetime to get our spirits act together. But again, this was a concept removed centuries ago from Christian teaching, and it was a hard lesson for people to even begin to consider the concept of repeated lives again. Now we're going to get into it. We believe that all life is sacred and that man should not kill nor be a party to the killing of animals for food. Also, that cruelty, war, and wanton destruction of human life will continue as long as men kill animals for food. Ooh, this was potent. This was disturbing. And in 1939, this was removed from Charles' original writings. As he became older, editors became bolder in reworking his words or ideas. So how do we look at this? Well, this is a good time to pause for a little ad. During the Sundays of February, which begin February 2nd, I'll do an after class or after service class, 12:15, just an hour, and it'll be a time for us to discuss these statements, shake them around, take them apart, and explore them. But this statement, Charles was working as were many in Unity who followed a vegetarian diet. They were working with this idea of what is the relationship of our physical diet, what we eat, to our consciousness or awareness of our place in the world. So I'm not going to go further with that today, but encourage you to come to the class and let's talk about it some more. Because I'm still one of those meat eaters in the world myself. And Charles, little trivia, when he was in his early 90s, he called a Unity Inn, which happened to be next door, and he said, "I'm coming over for lunch. I would like to have some fish." Ha! The kitchen didn't know what to do. They had to send someone out to get fish. What is going on? And at the end of his life, he occasionally wanted some animal protein. As he said, "I reserve the right to change my mind or to see things in a new way." He wouldn't have ordered that fish when this was written in 1921. Another controversial statement removed is number 29. We believe that the misuse of the generative function, as they call it, is responsible for the majority of human ills. Therefore, we believe that purity and control of sex are essential to health and the final overcoming of death. Mr. Fillmore, what's going on? Where are the children going to come from? As my father told one of his patients when she said, "Dr. Stacey, I've suddenly discovered I'm pregnant." And he said, "Well, you know, there is something that causes that." This idea, again, we'll discuss more in class, play with it and work with it and try to figure it out. Two things to point out. Once again, these statements were written as potent ideas to work with, not as statements to pledge your allegiance to. Charles, I believe, had a certain insight into the misuse of human sexual activity we all know can bring a lot of problems. So clearly seeing the divine gift in human sexual activity. But Charles also had a feeling that his concept of renewing the physical health of the individual could appropriate energies that were just scattered through thoughtless sexual activity, could appropriate those energies into rebuilding the true health of the individual in body, soul, and spirit. The last point we'll look at today, number 30. We believe in the final resurrection of the body through Christ. We believe that we do free our minds and resurrect our bodies by true thoughts and words, and that this resurrection is being carried forward daily, will ultimate in the final purification of the body from all earthly errors. Through this process, we shall be raised into the consciousness of continuous health and eternal life here and now. Not when we're dead, walking around on the clouds with a harp. Here and now. He saw unity as practical to our living as spirit human beings here on earth. I like to simplify this as God created individuals are also creative in how they choose their thoughts, words, and actions. That is, how we live. How you live, how you relate, how you act in this world makes a difference to you and to all. So let's take a moment in a simple meditation. I'm just going to briefly outline this and ask you to work with it on your own time when you have more time at home. But just gently close your eyes and take this thought. We believe that the Holy Mother, the Divine Feminine, is now being restored to her righteousness, and that she will reign equal with God in the heavens and the earth. Just look at that idea. What does it mean to you? How do you apply it in your individual life? Think of God, your source, as the quality of divine law, ideal, principle, that it is a spirit that helps guide your activity in this world. Now think of God as Mother, your almighty source that nurtures you and loves you, goes more than halfway to help you. Feel these powers, both of wisdom and of love, of discernment and unconditional embrace. Does it in any way expand how you've always considered God to be? Someone watching you, judging you, or a cheerleader, always on your side. Way to go. You can do this. I am here. I will never leave you. Hold this thought. Father, Mother God, always present, always guiding, always loving, all and all. And I invite you to allow your attention to gradually return to this room. And now that you have a copy of this beautiful document, try some of the statements on for size. Not to swear allegiance to, but to look at, to focus your attention on this. What speaks to me here? What can I learn? Yes, it's good to think, what did Charles and Myrtle intend? But it's more important for you to make that discovery for yourself through these ideas that they spent their life cultivating for the good of our unity communities. And so it is. Thanks be to God, Father, Mother, all. And so I invite us now to consider our gifts. Sometimes Carlotta helps me, but I love to take these statements and kind of work it through movement. So it helps me not only remember it, but to feel it, not just think it. So as you hold your gifts today, what you offer freely, lovingly, to support this congregation, our work, and our outer community, take these statements and just feel the movement. Together, God gives abundantly. I receive thankfully and give again generously. Feel that opening, that receiving, that giving again, because it helps you feel the cycle of giving and receiving, which is life.